The lecture hall buzzed with the usual chatter of Galactic University students, a mix of species from across the known systems. In the back corner, almost invisible among the towering Cathari and the crystalline Zephyrians, sat Sarah Chen, her small frame hunched over a datapad, brown hair falling like a curtain across her face. To her classmates, she might as well have been part of the furniture. Miss Chen, Professor Vextar's multiple eyes swiveled toward her, his insectoid features showing mild irritation. Perhaps you could enlighten us about the tactical failures during the Battle of Proxima 7? Sarah's head snapped up, her dark eyes meeting the professor's gaze for barely a second before dropping back down. Her voice was barely above a whisper. The coalition forces. They underestimated the terrain advantages. A few snickers rippled through the classroom. The Cathari student beside her, Thrakon, let out a dismissive grunt. His species had evolved from apex predators, standing nearly 8 feet tall with natural armor plating and razor-sharp claws. To him, humans were nothing more than soft, weak creatures who had somehow stumbled into space travel. Pathetic, Thrakon muttered, loud enough for others to hear. Humans always find excuses for their failures. Sarah's knuckles whitened as she gripped her datapad, but she said nothing. She never said anything. That was her survival strategy in this place where being human meant being seen as inferior. The truth was, Sarah knew everything about the Battle of Proxima 7. She knew that the coalition forces hadn't just underestimated the terrain, they had fundamentally misunderstood human tactical doctrine. She knew because she had lived it. 3 years ago, Sergeant Sarah Chen had been crouched in the burning ruins of Proxima 7's main colony, her pulse rifle humming with barely contained energy. The hegemony forces had thought they were facing another soft target, another easy conquest in their expansion across human space. They had been catastrophically wrong, but here, in this sterile academic environment, surrounded by species who viewed humans as galactic newcomers, barely worth acknowledging, Sarah kept that truth buried deep inside. Here, she was just another struggling student, barely keeping up with coursework designed by and for species with centuries more technological advancement. The class dragged on, covering military history with the detached analysis of those who had never felt the weight of a weapon in their hands or seen friends die in the mud. When the session finally ended, Sarah gathered her things quickly, hoping to slip out unnoticed. Chen. Thrakon's voice stopped her at the door. She turned to find him looming over her, his predator's smile showing rows of serrated teeth. You know, my species has a saying about creatures like yours. The weakest prey makes the most noise when cornered. But you don't even do that, do you? Sarah's throat felt tight. I just want to pass my classes and graduate. Doubtful. Another voice joined the conversation. Zixara, a Zephyrian whose crystalline body refracted the light in sharp, painful angles. Humans lack the cognitive processing power for true strategic thinking. It's why your species required assistance to reach spacefaring status. It was a common misconception among the galactic community. Humans had developed faster than light travel relatively recently compared to elder species, leading many to assume they had been given the technology rather than developing it independently. The truth was far more complex, involving desperate innovation during the early hegemony conflicts, but Sarah had learned that correcting such assumptions only drew unwanted attention. Maybe you should transfer to something more suited to your limitations, Thrakon suggested, his tone mockingly helpful. Agricultural studies, perhaps. Or waste management. Sarah felt the familiar burn in her chest, the same feeling she had experienced countless times during her military service when facing impossible odds. But here, there was no enemy to fight, no mission to complete. Here, the only victory was invisibility. I should go, she mumbled, pushing past them. As she walked across the campus grounds, Sarah's mind wandered to her small apartment, where she kept a single memento from her service, a worn photograph of her squad taken just days before the final battle on Proxima 7. 12 faces, all smiling, all believing they would make it home. Only 3 had. Her communication device chimed with an incoming message. Sarah glanced at it and felt her blood turn to ice. The sender was listed as Admiral Reeves' Priority Military Communication. She ducked into an empty alcove between buildings and opened the message. The Admiral's familiar, weathered face appeared on the small screen, his expression grim. Sergeant Chen. His voice was tight with urgency. I know you're trying to build a new life. But we need you. The hegemony has broken the ceasefire. They've launched a coordinated assault on the outer colonies, and initial reports suggest they're using new tactics we don't understand. The preliminary analysis is disturbing. Sarah's hands trembled as she held the device. Sir, with respect, I'm not active duty anymore. I'm just a student now. Sarah, the Admiral's voice softened slightly. You're the only surviving member of the tactical team that broke their offensive at Proxima 7. You understand their psychology better than anyone. Our current strategic assessment suggests they've adapted specifically to counter traditional human military doctrine. The image shifted to display tactical readouts, fleet movements, casualty reports, strategic analyses. Sarah's trained eye immediately began processing the information, identifying patterns that would be invisible to someone without combat experience. They're not just attacking randomly, she realized aloud. They're targeting agricultural colonies, supply routes, civilian populations first. They're trying to starve our military response by eliminating support infrastructure. Exactly, and that's just what we've figured out so far. We believe there's more to their strategy, something we're missing. We need your perspective. Sarah closed her eyes, seeing the faces of her dead squad mates. Sir, I can't. I'm not that person anymore. Sarah, in the past 6 months, they've glassed 4 colonies, 16 million civilians, dead. The current projections suggest complete human territorial collapse within 18 months if we can't develop effective countermeasures. The numbers hit her like physical blows. 16 million. She thought of the families on those colonies, parents tucking children into bed never knowing it would be the last time. She thought of the evacuation ships that had never had a chance to launch. I'll need access to full tactical databases, she heard herself say. Real-time intelligence feeds, fleet positioning data, enemy movement patterns for the last 6 months, already prepared. But Sarah, this has to be off the books. The Galactic Council has imposed strict neutrality requirements on all member institutions. If Galactic University discovers you're conducting military analysis, they'll expel me immediately. Sarah understood the implications. Her academic career, her attempt at a normal life, would be over, but against that was the weight of 16 million lives and counting. How long do I have? Our intelligence suggests they're preparing for a major offensive. Possibly the final push to eliminate human resistance. 2 weeks, maybe 3. 2 weeks to save humanity while pretending to be just another struggling student. 2 weeks to analyze an enemy that had evolved their tactics specifically to counter human strengths, while maintaining her carefully constructed facade of academic mediocrity. I'll do it, she said quietly. Sarah, there's one more thing. We can't provide you with military support or resources. No official recognition, no backup, no extraction if things go wrong. You'll be completely on your own. After the Admiral's image faded, Sarah stood in the alcove for long minutes, watching her fellow students pass by. They chatted about upcoming exams, social events, the latest entertainment feeds from their home worlds. Normal concerns for normal people living normal lives. None of them knew that the quiet human girl they barely noticed was about to single-handedly attempt to save their civilization. That evening, Sarah sat in her small apartment, staring at the photograph of her squad while tactical data scrolled across her personal computer screen. The hegemony's new patterns were subtle but disturbing. They had clearly studied human responses to their previous tactics and adapted accordingly. During the original Proxima 7 engagement, human forces had relied on their species' natural adaptability and creative problem-solving to overcome superior hegemony technology. But these new attack patterns suggested the enemy had found ways to neutralize those advantages. Sarah pulled up historical data from dozens of human conflicts, looking for patterns the hegemony might have identified and countered. What she found made her stomach clench with dread. They weren't just adapting to human military tactics. They were adapting to human psychology itself. Every successful human defense had relied on specific behavioral traits. The tendency to fight harder when protecting others, the ability to improvise under extreme pressure, the willingness to sacrifice individual safety for strategic advantage. The hegemony's new patterns seemed designed to nullify each of these traits systematically. Sarah worked through the night. Analyzing data while maintaining her student facade became increasingly difficult. During morning classes, Exhaustion made it even harder to concentrate on mundane academic discussions. Professor Vex's Tar's lecture on theoretical applications of multi-species cooperation felt surreal when she was secretly planning humanity's survival strategy. Miss Chen, the professor's voice cut through her mental fog. You seem particularly distracted today. Perhaps you'd like to share your thoughts on how inferior species can contribute meaningfully to galactic civilization. The question was loaded with assumption and barely concealed contempt. Around the room, non-human students waited for another demonstration of human inadequacy. Thrakon's predatory smile suggested he was hoping for entertainment. For a moment, Sarah felt the weight of everything. The secret mission, the casual prejudice, the exhaustion, the pressure of trying to save everyone while being seen as nothing. The urge to tell them exactly what she was and what she had done was almost overwhelming. Instead, she looked down at her hands and mumbled, I think every species probably has something unique to offer, even if it's not immediately obvious. More snickers. Even Professor Vex Tar's expression showed disappointment at such a bland, safe answer. But as Sarah returned to her data analysis that night, she realized her response had been more accurate than anyone knew. Humanity's unique contribution to galactic civilization might be invisible to her classmates, but the hegemony understood it well enough to fear it. Now she just had to figure out how to use that understanding to save everyone, including the people who would never know she had done it. Sarah's days fell into a grueling rhythm of deception. During daylight hours, she played the role of the invisible human student, sitting in the back of lecture halls and contributing just enough to avoid attention. But her nights belonged to war. In her cramped apartment, she had transformed the small study alcove into a makeshift command center. Multiple screens displayed real-time intelligence feeds, tactical analyses, and communication channels with human military commanders across the sector. The contrast between her public persona and her secret work was jarring by day, struggling with basic galactic history assignments. By night, orchestrating humanity's defense against extinction. The hegemony's new tactical approach was becoming clearer with each passing day, and it was more sophisticated than Sarah had initially realized. They weren't just countering human military strategies, they were psychological warfare on a species-wide scale. Computer, display hegemony target selection pattern for the past 90 days. Sarah commanded quietly, mindful of her thin apartment walls. The holographic display showed a chilling progression. The enemy had identified key psychological pressure points in human civilization: agricultural worlds that supplied food security, research stations that represented technological hope, and memorial worlds where humanity honored its dead. By targeting these specific locations, they were attacking human morale as much as human capability. Sarah's communication device chimed with an encrypted message from Admiral Reeves. His face appeared on screen, looking haggard. Sarah, we've lost contact with the Kepler research station. Intelligence suggests it was a surgical strike, no survivors. All research data destroyed. That's our third major scientific facility this week. Sarah felt the familiar burn of helpless anger. Kepler Station had been home to 12,000 researchers and their families. More importantly, for the war effort, it had been developing new defensive technologies that might have given humanity an edge. Admiral, I'm seeing a pattern in their target selection. They're not just trying to weaken us militarily, they're trying to break our will to fight. Each target represents something psychologically significant to human culture. Explain. Sarah called up her analysis on screen. Look at this progression. First, they hit agricultural colonies attacking our sense of security and abundance, then research facilities eliminating our hope for technological solutions. Now they're moving toward memorial worlds and cultural centers. They're trying to erase our identity, make us feel like we have nothing left worth fighting for. Admiral Reeves studied the data with growing understanding. And if humans lose the will to fight, we lose our primary military advantage. Human forces have consistently outperformed predictions when defending something they care about. Remove that emotional investment, and we become just another species with inferior technology facing a superior enemy. What do you recommend? Sarah had been working on this problem for days, running scenarios and analyzing possibilities. The solution was elegant in its simplicity, but implementing it would require resources she didn't have access to as a civilian. We need to give them false targets, she said. Locations that appear psychologically significant but are actually expendable. When they attack these decoy sites, We can study their new tactical methods in real time. More importantly, we can use their own psychological warfare against them. How? Sarah's voice gained intensity as she explained her plan. We make them think they're succeeding. Let them believe they're breaking human morale, while we secretly reinforce our real strategic positions. Then, when they commit to what they think is a final psychological blow, we turn it into a trap. The Admiral's eyes lit up with understanding. But Sarah, this would require coordinating with multiple fleet commanders, establishing false installations, managing information flow across dozens of colonies. I know, sir. It's too big for one person to handle alone. Actually, Admiral Reeves paused thoughtfully. There might be a way. The Galactic Council is hosting a major diplomatic conference next week. Most of the university faculty will be attending, along with representatives from every major species. If someone could access the Council's strategic databases during that time, Sarah immediately grasped the implication. You want me to hack the Galactic Council systems? Sir, that's not just career suicide, it's actual treason against the galactic government. Sarah, I'm not ordering you to do anything. I'm simply observing that someone with your tactical expertise, working from within a council member institution, might be able to access resources that would be impossible to obtain through official channels. The line went dead, leaving Sarah alone with the weight of the decision. Hacking Galactic Council systems would be the ultimate violation of her student status. If caught, she would face not just expulsion, but likely imprisonment or worse. But the alternative was watching humanity slowly bleed to death under psychological warfare they couldn't counter. Sarah spent the next day observing the university's security protocols with new eyes. The campus network connected directly to several Galactic Council databases, a privilege granted to prestigious academic institutions for research purposes. During normal times, these connections were heavily monitored. But with most of the faculty attending the diplomatic conference, that evening, she approached her computer with trembling fingers. Once she crossed this line, there would be no going back to her quiet student life. Her first probe into the university network was cautious, designed to look like routine academic research. The system's defenses were sophisticated but predictable, focused on preventing external intrusion rather than monitoring internal access patterns. Within hours, Sarah had mapped the network architecture and identified potential access points to council databases. The challenge would be extracting the information she needed without triggering security protocols. Meanwhile, she still had to maintain her academic facade. The next morning's military history class covered primitive warfare tactics of pre-spacefaring civilizations, a subject that felt insulting, given what she was secretly accomplishing. Professor Vex Tar was discussing human military evolution with his usual condescension. Interestingly, despite their technological limitations, early human armies showed remarkable adaptability. Of course, this was largely due to desperation rather than true strategic thinking. Thrakon raised one clawed hand. Professor, wouldn't it be more accurate to say that human military success was primarily due to their willingness to accept massive casualties? My research suggests they compensated for tactical inferiority through numerical superiority and expendable troops. Sarah bit her tongue so hard she tasted blood. The Kethari student was fundamentally misunderstanding human military philosophy, but correcting him would require revealing knowledge no ordinary student should possess. An astute observation, Thrakon, the professor agreed. Human military doctrine has historically relied on overwhelming force rather than elegant strategy. It's one reason their species required assistance reaching technological parity with galactic civilization. The casual dismissal of human capability was maddening, especially while Sarah was secretly working to save that same civilization. But she forced herself to remain invisible, to let them maintain their comfortable assumptions about human inferiority. That night, she made her move on the council databases. Sarah's fingers flew across the keyboard as she navigated layers of security designed to protect the most sensitive information in galactic civilization. Her military training had included basic cyber warfare techniques, but this was far beyond anything she had attempted before. The first barrier fell after 2 hours of careful probing. The second took 4 hours and required her to route her access through 3 different academic research projects to avoid detection. By dawn, she was deep inside restricted military intelligence databases, downloading terabytes of tactical data on hegemony operations. What she found exceeded her worst fears. The psychological warfare campaign wasn't just sophisticated, it was based on detailed analysis of human behavior patterns dating back centuries. The hegemony had studied everything from ancient Earth military conflicts to recent colonial expansion patterns, building a comprehensive model of human psychological vulnerabilities. But more disturbing was what else she discovered in the classified files. The hegemony wasn't working alone. Several other species had provided research and tactical support, including detailed behavioral analyses conducted under the guise of cultural exchange programs. Sarah realized with sick certainty that some of her own classmates' species had been actively collaborating with humanity's enemies. Her hands shook as she copied the files to encrypted storage devices. This information could change everything, but it also proved just how isolated humanity really was. Among the dozens of galactic species, very few had remained truly neutral in the conflict. A soft chime from her door sensor made Sarah's heart stop. According to her chronometer, it was barely dawn, too early for normal visitors, too late for her to be awake doing innocent student activities. She quickly shut down her computer systems and crept to the door viewer. Professor Vextar stood in the hallway, his insectoid features unreadable but somehow suspicious. Sarah's mind raced through possibilities. Had he detected her network intrusion? Was this a routine academic visit? A test of some kind? She opened the door, making sure to look sleepy and confused. Professor? Is everything all right? Vextar's multiple eyes studied her carefully. Miss Chen, I apologize for the early hour. I wanted to discuss your academic performance with you privately. Sarah's blood turned to ice, but she maintained her confused expression. Of course, Professor. Please come in. As Vextar entered her small apartment, Sarah desperately tried to remember if she had left any evidence of her real activities visible. The tactical displays were shut down. The communication equipment was hidden. But trained eyes might notice details that revealed more than intended. I've been reviewing your coursework, Miss Chen, and I find myself puzzled. Vextar's tone was measured, but there was something predatory in his attention. Your written assignments suggest a remarkably superficial understanding of military strategy, yet your exam answers occasionally demonstrate insights that seem far beyond your apparent knowledge level. Sarah's mouth went dry. I study hard, Professor. Sometimes I get lucky with my guesses. Vextar moved around the room, ostensibly admiring her sparse decorations but clearly examining everything. For instance, your recent essay on supply chain vulnerabilities in extended campaigns. Most of your analysis was pedestrian, but you mentioned a tactical consideration that wouldn't occur to someone without practical experience. He was standing near her desk now, close enough to her hidden computer systems to make Sarah's hands sweat. One carelessly placed device, one indication that she had access to military-grade equipment, and her cover would be blown. I probably read about it somewhere, she said weakly. Professor Vextar turned to face her directly, his alien features impossible to read. Miss Chen, I've been teaching military history for 37 standard years. I've seen thousands of students from hundreds of species. Most humans who enter my program are enthusiastic but naive. They have romantic notions about warfare based on their species' cultural mythology. Sarah remained silent, afraid that any response would reveal too much. But you, Vextar continued, you seem almost afraid of the subject matter. You participate minimally, avoid detailed discussions, and yet your understanding occasionally surfaces in ways that suggest real knowledge. It's quite unusual. The professor moved closer, his multiple eyes focusing on her with uncomfortable intensity. Tell me, Miss Chen, have you ever actually experienced combat? The direct question hit Sarah like a physical blow. For a moment, she was back on Proxima 7, feeling the heat of energy weapons and the weight of command responsibility. She could see her squadmates' faces, hear the sound of incoming artillery, smell the smoke and blood and fear that had defined those final days. No, she whispered, probably too quietly to be convincing. Professor Vextar studied her for a long moment, then seemed to reach some kind of decision. I see. Well, Miss Chen, I wanted to inform you that I'm recommending you for advanced placement in next semester's strategic analysis course. Your work shows potential that might benefit from more challenging material. Sarah blinked in confusion. Advanced placement? Yes, it's unusual for a human student, but I believe you might surprise us all. Vextar moved toward the door, then paused. One piece of advice, Miss Chen. Whatever secrets you're carrying, remember that the academic environment is designed to be safe. Sometimes the greatest learning comes from stepping out of one's comfort zone. After he left, Sarah sat on her bed for a full hour, trying to process what had just happened. Had Professor Vextar discovered her real identity? Was his offer of advanced placement a test, a trap, or genuine academic interest? More importantly, how could she continue her secret mission while under increased scrutiny from faculty who were clearly more observant than she had assumed? Sarah returned to her computer with new urgency. The intelligence she had gathered needed to be analyzed and transmitted immediately. She might not have many more opportunities for covert operations. As she worked, a new message arrived from Admiral Reeves. His expression was grimmer than ever. Sarah, we've received disturbing intelligence about hegemony troop movements. They appear to be massing for a major offensive, possibly targeting the Sol system itself. We need your analysis of their psychological warfare program immediately. How much time do you need? Sarah looked at the massive amount of data she had acquired, then at her class schedule showing 3 major exams in the next week, then at the tactical analyses that would require days of intensive work to complete properly. 48 hours, she replied, knowing it was impossible but also knowing that the alternative might be the end of human civilization. What she didn't know was that her activities had already attracted attention from sources far more dangerous than academic faculty. In a secure facility 3 systems away, an intelligence analyst was reviewing routine network monitoring reports and noticing unusual patterns of data access at Galactic University. The analyst was Zephyrian, crystalline, and coldly logical, contracted by the hegemony to monitor potential security breaches in allied institutions. What appeared to be academic research access looked suspiciously like military intelligence gathering when analyzed by someone trained to recognize such patterns. The report was flagged for immediate investigation. Sarah worked through 36 straight hours, surviving on stimulants and sheer determination. The intelligence she had extracted from Galactic Council databases painted a horrifying picture of coordinated galactic conspiracy against humanity. But buried within the data was also the key to salvation. The hegemony's psychological warfare model was based on one critical assumption: that humans would respond predictably to emotional manipulation. They had studied human history extensively, identifying patterns of behavior under stress, but they had missed something crucial. Every case study they had analyzed involved humans defending against external threats. They had never studied what happened when humans went on the offensive while defending something they loved. Sarah's tactical analysis was elegant and brutal. Instead of trying to protect human colonies from psychological attack, she proposed using humanity's emotional responses as a weapon. The plan required sacrifice. Some colonies would have to endure terrible losses to maintain the deception, but it could work. Her communication with Admiral Reeves was interrupted by an urgent security alert on her personal systems. Someone was attempting to trace her network access patterns. Sarah's blood ran cold as she realized her infiltration of Council databases had been discovered. She had minutes, maybe less, before security forces would arrive at her dormitory. Sarah's military training kicked in automatically. She began emergency data purging protocols, uploading her completed analysis to Admiral Reeves while simultaneously destroying all evidence of her covert activities. Her hands moved with practiced efficiency, muscle memory from countless emergency situations overriding the panic threatening to overwhelm her thoughts. The purge was only halfway complete when she heard footsteps in the hallway outside. Too many footsteps, moving with military precision. Sarah grabbed the one item she couldn't replace, the photograph of her squad, and slipped out her window onto the maintenance walkway between buildings. Behind her, she heard the distinctive sound of her door being forcibly opened. Through her window, she could see figures in Galactic Council security armor searching her apartment. One was scanning the room with detection equipment while another examined her computer systems. A third figure stood supervising, tall, crystalline, unmistakably Zephyrian. Sarah recognized him immediately. Zixara, her classmate from military history. The same student who had mocked human intelligence and suggested she transfer to waste management. Except now he was wearing the insignia of a hegemony intelligence operative. The betrayal hit her like a physical blow. Her fellow students weren't just dismissive of human capability, some were actively working to ensure human destruction. Sarah made her way across the campus maintenance areas, using routes she had memorized during her first week as basic security protocol. Her destination was the emergency communication station, hidden in the university's old archives, building a backup system she had prepared but hoped never to use. Behind her, security alerts were beginning to sound across the campus. Whatever cover story they were using, it was mobilizing significant resources. Sarah could hear aircraft overhead and see search teams fanning out across the grounds. She reached the archives building as dawn was breaking, her body exhausted and her mind running on pure adrenaline. The emergency communication station was a jury-rigged system hidden in the basement, designed to look like abandoned academic equipment. Sarah activated the system and immediately sent a priority burst transmission to Admiral Reeves. Package delivered, cover blown, going dark. The Admiral's response came within seconds. Sarah, we've received your analysis. It's brilliant. But we're showing massive hegemony fleet movement toward Sol system. Whatever they're planning, it's happening now. Sarah felt the weight of impossible choices. Her tactical analysis could save humanity, but only if she remained free to coordinate the implementation. And that was looking increasingly unlikely. Admiral, the psychological warfare strategy depends on precise timing and coordination. Someone needs to be available to adjust the plan based on enemy responses. Sarah, you've done enough. Find somewhere safe and, sir, with respect, there is nowhere safe if this fails. Sarah shut down the communication and began planning her next move. Above her, she could hear search teams entering the building. They were being methodical but not urgent, which suggested they expected to corner her eventually rather than capture her immediately. That gave her a small advantage, but not much. Sarah's options were limited. She could try to escape the planet entirely, abandoning her mission but preserving her freedom. She could attempt to continue covert operations from hiding, risking capture but maintaining the ability to support the war effort. Or she could do something that went against every instinct developed during 3 years of careful invisibility. She could stop hiding. Sarah accessed the university's main communication system and sent a message to every student, faculty member, and administrator on campus. The message was simple. Emergency assembly in the main auditorium. Critical information regarding ongoing galactic security situation. Then she walked upstairs, directly toward the search teams looking for her. The first security operative she encountered was a Kethari warrior similar to Thrakan, tall, armored, and confident in his physical superiority. When he saw the small human woman approaching voluntarily, his predatory smile suggested he expected easy prey. Sarah Chen, you are under arrest for unauthorized access to classified. Sarah moved. 3 years of careful invisibility had made people forget something important about humans who survived military combat. They survived for a reason. The Kethari operative outweighed Sarah by more than 100 pounds and had natural weapons that could tear through armor. But Sarah had spent years learning to kill things that were bigger, stronger, and better armed than herself. Moreover, she was fighting for something the operative couldn't understand. Not just her own survival, but the survival of everyone she had ever sworn to protect. The engagement lasted less than 30 seconds. When it was over, the operative was unconscious and Sarah was armed with military-grade equipment. She continued through the building, encountering and disabling 2 more search teams with ruthless efficiency. But more concerning than the individual opponents was the coordination of their efforts. This wasn't a simple arrest operation, it was a military strike designed to capture or eliminate a high-value target. Sarah reached the main auditorium to find it filling with confused students and faculty. Many recognized her as the quiet human from various classes, but none understood why she had called this assembly. She walked onto the central stage, still carrying the weapon she had taken from the security operative. The sight of a human student armed with military equipment caused immediate commotion. My name is Sarah Chen, she began, her voice carrying clearly through the acoustically designed space. Most of you know me as a struggling student who can barely keep up with coursework designed for more advanced species. Murmurs rippled through the crowd. She could see Professor Vextar in the faculty section, his expression unreadable. Thrakan and several other students who had mocked her were staring with confusion and growing alarm. What you don't know, Sarah continued, is that I am also Sergeant Sarah Chen, veteran of the Battle of Proxima 7, and currently the only person standing between your civilizations and total annihilation by the hegemony. The murmurs became shouts of disbelief and anger. Several students began moving toward exits, clearly thinking they were witnessing some kind of mental breakdown. I understand your skepticism, Sarah said, raising her voice. For 3 years, I've allowed you to believe humans are inferior, technologically dependent, strategically naive. I've sat quietly while you've discussed my species as though we were barely sentient. Zixara pushed through the crowd toward the stage, no longer bothering to hide his true nature. Sarah could see the hegemony intelligence insignia clearly now, as well as the weapon he was drawing. The truth, Sarah continued, tracking Zixara's movement while addressing the crowd, is that humans are very good at one thing that your species have never had to learn. We are exceptionally good at killing things that are trying to kill us. Zixara raised his weapon, aiming at Sarah from the crowd. His crystalline features reflected light in sharp, deadly angles as he prepared to fire. Sarah moved again. This time, the audience could see exactly what 3 years of military training meant when applied without restraint. Sarah crossed 20 meters of open ground, disarmed Zixara, and had him pinned before most observers could process what was happening. As I was saying, Sarah continued calmly, holding the hegemony operative immobilized. My species excels at adaptive combat tactics. The auditorium erupted in chaos. Students were screaming, faculty were shouting for security, and several more figures in the crowd were revealing themselves as hegemony operatives. Sarah found herself facing multiple armed opponents while trying to protect several hundred civilians who still didn't understand what was happening. It was exactly the kind of impossible tactical situation that human military doctrine was designed to handle. She smiled for the first time in 3 years. Computer, Sarah called to the university's public address system. Display file package Omega-7 on all screens. Every display in the auditorium activated, showing detailed intelligence analyses of hegemony operations, lists of collaborating species, and tactical projections for the ongoing assault on human space. But most importantly, it showed the solution. Ladies and gentlemen, Sarah announced while methodically disabling the remaining operatives, you are looking at comprehensive proof that several of your home governments have been actively supporting the systematic extermination of my species. The revelations on screen were devastating. Trade agreements that were actually intelligence sharing arrangements, cultural exchange programs that were cover for military reconnaissance, academic research projects that provided detailed behavioral analyses for psychological warfare. The hegemony's strategy depends on maintaining the illusion that humans are weak and isolated, Sarah continued. They need you to believe that human destruction is inevitable, so you don't interfere with their operations. Professor Vextar stood up in the faculty section, his multiple eyes focused intently on Sarah. Miss Chen, these are very serious accusations. Do you have verification of this intelligence? Sarah gestured toward the screens showing real-time data feeds. Professor, this information is coming directly from Galactic Council databases. Your government has been tracking hegemony fleet movements for months without warning human forces. The implications rippled through the crowd like shockwaves. Students began demanding answers from faculty members whose species were listed as collaborators. Faculty members were staring at evidence of their government's betrayals with expressions of horror and disbelief. But Sarah's attention was focused on incoming tactical updates displayed on her personal scanner. The main hegemony fleet was approaching Sol system faster than anticipated, and preliminary reports suggested they were using the psychological warfare tactics she had been analyzing. Admiral Reeves, Sarah called into her communicator, not caring anymore who heard. Operation Pandora is authorized. Implement immediately. The Admiral's voice crackled through the speakers. Sarah, are you sure? Once we begin this, there's no going back to diplomatic solutions. Sir, diplomatic solutions ended when they decided to exterminate us. Execute Pandora. Around the galaxy, human forces began implementing Sarah's tactical analysis. Instead of defending predictably against psychological attacks, they began using the hegemony's own strategies against them. Human colonies that appeared to be suffering morale collapse were actually preparing devastating counterattacks. Memorial worlds that seemed vulnerable were transformed into tactical traps. Agricultural planets that appeared defenseless became bases for mobile strike forces. The strategy was working, but it required constant adjustment as the hegemony adapted to human responses. Sarah found herself simultaneously commanding a galactic defense while standing on an auditorium stage, surrounded by alien students who had spent 3 years dismissing her as intellectually inferior. Thrakun, Sarah called to her former classmate, who was staring at her with a mixture of awe and terror. Your species' military history includes extensive experience with adaptive defense strategies. I could use tactical consultation on fleet positioning in the Rigel sector. The massive Kethari predator looked confused. You. You want my help? Your species has been neutral in this conflict, which means your strategic perspective isn't compromised by political considerations. Also, your natural spatial reasoning abilities could provide insights my human-centric analysis might miss. It was a moment of pure cognitive dissonance. The tiny human who had been invisible for 3 years was suddenly revealed as a master strategist requesting military advice from the species that had considered her prey. But Thrakon responded to the logic of the request. Within minutes, he was providing tactical analysis that helped Sarah optimize fleet positions across 3 star systems. Similar conversations were happening throughout the auditorium. Students and faculty from dozens of species found themselves contributing to humanity's defense, many for the first time understanding what humans were actually capable of when fighting for their survival. The battle reports coming through Sarah's communication systems told the story of a species revealing its true nature. Human forces weren't just defending anymore, they were systematically dismantling hegemony operational capacity using tactics no one had expected. Sarah, Admiral Reeves's voice was filled with admiration. The psychological warfare reversals are working beyond our most optimistic projections. Hegemony forces are showing signs of systemic morale collapse. They genuinely believed humans were incapable of this level of strategic sophistication. Sarah felt a moment of bitter satisfaction. Admiral, they spent so much time studying how humans respond to threats that they never considered how we initiate them. The final reports arrived 6 hours later. Hegemony forces were retreating from human space, their invasion plans in complete disarray. More importantly, several of their allied species were reconsidering their support for the campaign. Having witnessed human military capability firsthand, Sarah finally allowed herself to sit down, exhaustion overwhelming the adrenaline that had sustained her through the crisis. Around her, the auditorium was still filled with students and faculty, many of whom were processing fundamental changes in their understanding of galactic politics and human nature. Professor Vextar approached the stage, his alien features showing something that might have been respect. Miss Chen, I owe you an apology. My assessment of human strategic capabilities was clearly inadequate. Sarah looked up at him, remembering 3 years of condescending lectures and dismissive comments. Professor, you weren't wrong about humans being different from other species. You were wrong about thinking different meant inferior. Indeed. Tell me, what will you do now? Obviously, continuing as a student would be somewhat anticlimactic. Sarah considered the question seriously. Actually, Professor, I think I'd like to continue my education. There's a lot about galactic civilization I still don't understand, but maybe we could adjust the curriculum to be a bit more realistic about human capabilities. Professor Vextar's expression might have been a smile. I think that could be arranged. As the auditorium finally began to empty, Sarah found herself approached by Thrakon and several other students who had previously ignored or mocked her. Their attitudes were completely transformed, no longer seeing prey. They were looking at a fellow warrior worthy of respect. Chen, Thrakon said formally. My species has a tradition of honoring those who demonstrate exceptional combat prowess. If you are interested, I would be honored to sponsor your application to the HFY War College. Sarah smiled, thinking about the irony of receiving such offers after spending 3 years trying to be invisible. Thrakon, I appreciate that, but I think I'll stay here for now. Someone needs to make sure the military history curriculum actually reflects what modern warfare looks like. As her classmates dispersed, Sarah remained on the stage, looking out at the empty auditorium where she had finally revealed her true nature. Tomorrow, there would be new challenges, political complications from her revelations, academic adjustments to accommodate her real identity, and the ongoing work of rebuilding human relationships with galactic civilization. But tonight, for the first time in 3 years, Sarah Chen could sleep without pretending to be someone else. The quiet human girl who barely existed on campus was gone forever. In her place was a warrior who had saved civilization while teaching everyone around her a fundamental lesson about the dangers of underestimating those who choose to remain invisible. As Sarah walked back toward her dormitory now under full military escort, rather than hiding in maintenance tunnels, she passed the memorial garden, where she had often sat alone during her months of isolation. She paused for a moment, thinking about her squad mates from Proxima 7 who hadn't lived to see this victory. They would have been proud to know that their sacrifice had led to something more than just winning a single battle. It had led to redefining humanity's place in galactic civilization and proving that sometimes the most dangerous predators are the ones that look like prey. Sarah reached her dormitory to find a message waiting from Admiral Reeves. The text was simple. "Well done, Sergeant. Welcome back." For the first time since arriving at Galactic University, Sarah responded using her real military rank and identity. She was done hiding who she was and what she was capable of. The galaxy was about to learn what humans could accomplish when they stopped pretending to be something they weren't.